Another attack in South Germany, a suicide bombing outside a music festival, the third attack in that part of the country in a week. A failed Syrian asylum seeker blew himself up last night, injuring 15 people. He's believed to have supported so-called Islamic State.
I saw one older gentleman laying on the floor with blood on his head, and I was able to push past the security who were trying to tell me to go away. I said, my sister's still in there, I need to go in there.
The spate of attacks in such a short time has left Germany questioning why it has become a target for violence. Also tonight, an MP's report into the collapse of BHS criticises its former boss, Sir Philip Green. One MP calls for him to pay back the pension deficit.
If he values his knighthood, wants any chance of keeping it, he ought to stop messing around, get off his boat, get back to the pension regulator and sign a whacking huge cheque.
Russian athletes arrive in Rio, but will they be allowed to compete in the Olympics? New research begins to unlock the secrets of the teenage brain and explain their behaviour. And Big Sam calls managing England the greatest challenge of his career.
In the south, a former fireman wrongly jailed for abusing a schoolboy is freed after the judge says his alleged victim is a chronic liar. And in the fast lane, plans for how one of the south's biggest bottlenecks could be improved.
Good evening. Germany is to step up security across airports, railway stations and other public places after 3 violent attacks in the south of the country in the space of a week, all of which have targeted innocent bystanders. According to the police, the Syrian man who blew himself up yesterday outside a music festival in Ansbach, injuring 15 people, had left a video pledging his allegiance to so-called Islamic State. The 3 attacks appear unrelated, but they've led to further questions in Germany over its open-door policy for refugees. Our correspondent Chris Buckler is in Ansbach, and his report contains some flash photography.
In a courtyard of one of Bavaria's most picturesque towns is the chalk outline of a suicide bomber. And the drinks abandoned by people when he blew himself up. He tried to enter this square, which was packed with people for a music festival. When he was stopped by security, he detonated the bomb he was carrying just outside its gates.
I ran back towards the concert entrance, and I saw one older gentleman laying on the floor with blood on his head, and I was able to push past the security who were trying to tell me to go away. I said, my sister's still in there, I need to go in there. I think I heard that there were 6 or 7 people on the floor that needed help.
The explosion caused panic in a country already on edge. The last week in Germany has seen a mass shooting in Munich, a machete attack, and a teenage asylum seeker injure 5 people on a train with an axe. And this bombing, like that last attack, has been linked to the so-called Islamic State terror group.
Als Video festgestellt worden.
On the bomber's mobile phone, there's a video of him issuing an attack threat in Arabic, for which we've now received a first translation. According to this, he pledges in the name of Allah his allegiance to the well-known IS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and expressly announces an act of revenge against the Germans.
The attacker was a Syrian refugee who was staying at temporary accommodation. Detectives found more bomb-making material in his room. He'd recently been told that he was being deported to Bulgaria, where he had been granted asylum. People who lived alongside him at this old hotel say he had mental health problems and that he tried to kill himself before.
ISIS, you know ISIS, right? He always said that, no, I'm not with them, I don't like them, and such stuff. But I think he had some issues.
The German government has made a point of welcoming refugees from troubled countries. But in the conservative and mainly Catholic state of Bavaria, unease is growing with the numbers, and that's partly because of security.
I think it's good that Germany do this, to take these guys in our country and give them a safer life, but if this more time happens like this one here, then sorry that I'm saying this, but it needs to stop now.
In Ansbach, there is sympathy and help for asylum seekers. But even among those who have fled countries like Syria, there are concerns.
In the future, you will have to be careful when you welcome everybody, because some are messed up and have psychological problems.
As police search through the debris of the bombing, detectives will continue to look for the reason he killed himself and so nearly killed so many others.
Well, let's talk to Chris, who's still in Ansbach for us tonight. Chris, there must be a real sense of tension there in the town.
Well, naturally, people are fearful, and that's because of the series of attacks that we've seen over the last 7 days. But as you can probably hear, people are on the streets of Ansbach tonight. They're out at some of the bars even that were behind police cordons today. They are determined to show that this will not change their way of life. But of course there will be an impact. The German and Bavarian authorities have already talked today about extra police on the streets, extra security at airports. But their greatest concern will be about these suggestions, these claims of a link between the man responsible for the suicide bombing here and IS. Of course, that has not been proven, and certainly there are other issues. But that also raises another question for Germany. It's worth pointing out that the attacker here and the teenager who was involved in the shooting in Munich on Friday both had mental health problems. Yet somehow they got access to deadly weapons and were able to bring them onto the street. That is a real concern for Germany.
Chris Buckley in Ansbach, thank you. The unacceptable face of capitalism. That's the scathing verdict of a parliamentary report into the collapse of BHS. MPs said the role of the former boss, Sir Philip Green, was a major factor in the demise of what was once a high street giant, and called on him to pay back some or all of the company's £571 million pension black hole. Sir Philip Green has hit back, saying the report is not a fair portrayal of what actually happened. Here's our business editor, Simon Jack.
After countless hours of evidence and thousands of documents reviewed, the story of BHS showed the unacceptable face of capitalism. The parliamentary report described a company run as a personal fiefdom by one owner before collapsing under his incompetent and self-serving successor. The co-chair of the report committee said one person alone is really responsible for the BHS disaster, and that person was Sir Philip Green. He comes in for savage criticism for extracting hundreds of millions of pounds to fund a lavish lifestyle, unrestrained by any independent oversight.
The Napoleon of this, that directed all the operations, was Philip Green. And although he pointed the finger at everybody else, all the fingers really point to him.
BHS was sold for just £1 last year, and the details were settled on this handwritten note, a deal that helped seal the fate of up to 10,000 workers. Like staff in South Shields putting a brave face on their last day.
I feel like I've been a loyal employee for 11 years because he owned the company when I took it on, and I've given me best, I've given everything to British Home Stores, and I feel like he doesn't care about any of it. He just sits with a smug look on his face, and he really doesn't care about us.
You've made me very angry.
Like, emotions are very high at the minute, a lot of different emotions, and I think we're just all hoping he sort of gets his comeuppance really, and you know, he will get what's coming to him.
As stores begin closing down across the UK, Sir Philip Green is many miles away in the Mediterranean. When I asked him today when he was coming back, he joked, hopefully never. But he knows he's got unfinished business here, particularly with the pensions regulator. Now, how he chooses to deal with that may tell us a bit about how much he likes being called Sir Philip Green.
Sir, do you mind not looking at me like that all the time? It's really disturbing.
The government has confirmed his knighthood is under review, and that decision may hinge on whether he delivers on a promise to tackle a £500 million hole in the pension fund.
It's resolvable, sortable, we will sort it, we will find a solution, and I want to give an assurance to the 20,000 pensioners, I'm there to sort this.
Others were also condemned. Dominic Chappell, who bought the company from Sir Philip, was described as manifestly unsuitable and out of his depth, while some of the biggest names in financial services were also criticised for their role. But it was Sir Philip Green who was the unwilling star of the show, and tonight he issued a statement calling the report the predetermined and inaccurate output of a biased and unfair process. He said he was still working on a pension deal and added, "I'm sad and sorry for all the BHS people caught up in this horrid story, but I do not believe that this story is being in any way fairly portrayed." It's too early to know whether that proves enough to save his reputation and possibly his knighthood.
So, Simon, we've got thousands of BHS employees who stand to risk losing some or all of their pensions. Meanwhile, Sir Philip Green is writing a threatening legal letter. What's likely to happen next in this saga?
Well, in the last few hours, what's erupted is a big war of words, with Sir Philip Green threatening to sue one of the report's co-authors, Frank Field, for comparing him in a broadcast to the late Robert Maxwell, who, if you remember, removed money from the Mirror Pension Group funds, something he's not accused of doing by any means in this report, and also suggesting illegality in the manner in which Philip Green took money out of BHS. Again, that is something the report does not acknowledge. Now, Frank Field says he has no intention of apologising, so those two are on a legal collision course again. I say again because Frank Field called for Philip Green to be stripped of his knighthood before the evidence had even been given in this, and that's one of the reasons why Sir Philip Green says that this was the product of a biased process. So those two are on the collision course again. That's no comfort, of course, to 10,000 workers and, of course, 20,000 pensioners who, at the moment, as things stand, are facing big cuts to their pension income. Now, he says that he's talking to the pension regulator, so we may find out exactly how much Philip Green thinks his knighthood is worth.
Simon, thanks very much. Theresa May has held talks in Belfast with senior political leaders to discuss the consequences of the UK's decision to leave the European Union. Northern Ireland is the only part of the UK to share a land border with the EU, and at the moment people can move unrestricted across it. The Prime Minister said no one wanted a return to the barriers and checkpoints of the past. From Stormont, here's our political correspondent Alex Forsyth.
For Northern Ireland, the consequences of Brexit could be profound. Most people here opted to remain, but the overall vote to leave means this border with the Republic of Ireland will soon separate the UK from the rest of the EU, raising questions for thousands who live near and cross regularly. Theresa May, visiting Stormont for the first time as Prime Minister, had suggested before the referendum there could be border controls, but today offered reassurance.
Nobody wants to return to the borders of the past. What we do want to do is to find a way through this that is going to work, deliver a practical solution for everybody, as part of the work that we're doing to ensure that we make a success of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, and that we come out of this with a deal which is in the best interests of the whole of the United Kingdom.
This is why the border matters. Memories of security during the Troubles. There were customs checks in the past too. None here now, but Brexit could mean tariffs on trade or restrictions on migration. Politically, there's a stated desire to keep movement across the border easy and free. But practically, there could be challenges in managing the flow of goods and people when this becomes the border between the UK and the rest of the EU. People in border areas like Newry are already considering the possible impact.
For travel, and we had such freedom before, I would hate to think that that would end.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are concerned, about it, because you just don't know what's going to happen, really.
Back at Stormont Castle, the First Minister said there'd be no return to hard borders.
What we want to see is the free movement of people in terms of the common travel area, but dealing with the other issue of immigration in a very different way.
But Sinn Féin has warned Brexit could be reason for Northern Ireland to consider leaving the UK and uniting with the Republic of Ireland. The Deputy First Minister today saying those who wanted to remain in the EU shouldn't be ignored.
I made it clear to the British Prime Minister that the democratically expressed wishes of the people of the North, who see their future in Europe and who voted to remain in Europe, should be respected.
What happens here, like elsewhere, will depend on the deal the UK strikes on immigration and the single market. There is determination to maintain stability, but the impact of Brexit could stretch beyond the border. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Northern Ireland.
With 11 days to go until the Olympic Games in Rio, individual sports associations are under pressure to decide whether or not Russian athletes can take part, following a decision yesterday not to impose a blanket ban over doping. So far, the Russian tennis and archery teams have been told they can compete, as have Russian swimmers, although swimming's governing body has declared 7 ineligible. That's because they've been found to have doped in the past. Russian athletes have now begun arriving in Rio, unclear about whether they'll be allowed to compete or not, as our correspondent Wira Davis reports.
Russian gymnasts arriving in Rio, bleary-eyed after the long flight from Moscow and still not sure if they'll be allowed to participate. Gymnastics, a sport in which they'd expect to win a hatful of medals.
I can imagine Olympic Games without Russia. It's not possible.
But there are mixed feelings about Russia's participation in the Rio Games. Joyce Silver's sport, freestyle wrestling, has been plagued in the past by doping. Earlier this year, several Russian wrestlers were exposed as drugs cheats, and Joyce does not want them in Rio. Doping is completely unfair, says the Brazilian medal hopeful. When you're fighting and losing to an opponent who's on drugs, it's soul-destroying and feels like you're being robbed. Russia's track and field squad was the first to be banned from Rio, but the IOC sidestepped the thorny issue of whether to ban the entire Russian delegation, despite accusations of state-sponsored doping. The governing bodies of individual sports now deciding if Russians can compete. It all means a critical role for Brazil's new anti-doping lab, which will test 450 samples daily during the Games. But it's only just recovered its licence to operate after being accused of failing to meet international scientific standards.
The laboratory will be the most technically efficient laboratory during the Games, with all the expertise the world has in anti-doping analysis. So this will be a message for those athletes that would maybe dare to cheat for the Games or before the Games, that they will be caught.
The Olympic movement has rarely come under such scrutiny, its ideals questioned as much. But with doping such a big issue, it's vital that Rio 2016 is seen to get things right. Pedro Solberg was denied a place at London 2012 when he was wrongly declared a drugs cheat. He says the eagerness to defeat doping runs the risk of inadvertently stigmatizing honest athletes.
People who didn't use drugs, who didn't do anything wrong, they should not be out of the Olympics because of other people's mistakes. I know exactly how is this feeling, you know?
How many Russians will win medals in Rio? It's anyone's guess, with so many athletes so late in the day, still unsure if they'll be allowed to compete. Wira Davis, BBC News, Rio.
Let's take a brief look at some of the day's other news stories. 2 teenagers have been killed and 17 others injured in a shooting at a nightclub in Florida. The shooting erupted in the car park of the club in Fort Myers as parents were picking up their children from a teen party. 3 people are being questioned by police who say it wasn't an act of terrorism. A man who's accused of drugging and murdering 4 men in East London is facing new charges. Stephen Port, who's 41 and from Barking, denies killing the men who he met on gay websites, as well as a series of attacks on 8 other men. 2 people have been arrested in connection with a fatal shooting at a party in Surrey. A 34-year-old man was killed and a woman shot in the leg at the event in the village of Headley. The weapon used, thought to be a handgun, hasn't been found. The Democratic Party convention, which will officially nominate Hillary Clinton as its presidential candidate, has got underway. On day 1 of the convention in Philadelphia, key speakers include Mrs. Clinton's former rival, Bernie Sanders, and the First Lady, Michelle Obama. But a row over leaked emails threatens to overshadow proceedings, with the chair of the Democratic National Committee being forced to resign, as our North America editor, John Sopel, reports.
So much for unity. These aren't cheers for the DNC chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. They're boos.
All right, everybody now, settle down.
From Bernie Sanders supporters, furious at leaked emails which show the party machine has been anything but even-handed in its handling of the primary campaign between Sanders and Hillary Clinton.
So I can see there's a little bit of interest in my being here, and I appreciate that interest.
But such has been the intensity of interest that she's been forced to stand down and will play no further role in the convention. Hillary Clinton was today meeting veterans in North Carolina before coming to Philadelphia. But in an interview which aired last night, she said this particular email saga had nothing to do with her.
I don't have any information about this, and so I can't answer specifically. I can't speak to what people who were not working for me, who were saying whatever they were saying. I can't speak to that. I can only speak to my campaign.
All of which has been a gift wrapped in a ribbon and a bow for Donald Trump, tweeting delightedly, "Here we go with another Clinton scandal. Crooked Hillary knew the fix was in. B, meaning Bernie, never had a chance." And in Virginia, he seemed to relish going back to his old job as host of The Apprentice.
He just got fired. They said, "Debbie, you're fired. Get out, Debbie. Out. Boom."
Bernie Sanders addressed his loyal supporters here in Philadelphia a short time ago. And listen to the reaction of the crowd when he tells them what they have to do.
And we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
And it's the same story on the streets of Philadelphia.
Hell no, DNC! We won't vote for Hillary! Hell no, DNC! We won't vote for Hillary!
The slogan of this convention is United Together. That seems more aspiration than reality at the moment. And in the past few moments, the Democratic National Committee have issued a statement of apology to Bernie Sanders. On behalf of everyone at the DNC, we want to offer a deep and sincere apology to Senator Sanders, his supporters and the entire Democratic Party for the inexcusable remarks made over email. And I should say, here in the hall, every mention of Hillary Clinton gets boos and chants of Bernie, Bernie. There is a mutinous atmosphere here in Philadelphia. Fiona.
John, thanks very much. It's a mystery that has perplexed parents since time immemorial. Why do teenagers behave the way they do? Now, scientists at Cambridge University have gained some insight into the huge personality and behavioural changes teenagers undergo using brain scanning techniques and genetics. And they're also gaining clues about why some develop mental illnesses in late teens and early adulthood. Here's our science correspondent, Palak Ghosh.
The human brain, it changes so much as we grow, shaping how we think and feel, most profoundly during our teenage years. Ruby Burbage is 22 now, but like many of us, felt powerful feelings during her adolescence.
When I was younger, I just was horrible, like just mean and shouting, and as I've developed into an adult and come out of that adolescent stage, I've had more of a thought process, and I take time in thinking about my actions before I do it. I think that was kind of lost during the time that I was adolescent. It was very reactionary.
To understand these changes, scientists scanned the brains of 300 healthy volunteers between the ages of 14 and 24. They were looking at the network of nerve centres that direct messages from one part of the brain to another. You can think of this like the global airline network. That's made up of small, infrequently used airports and huge hubs like Heathrow, where there's very high traffic. The brain uses a similar setup to coordinate our thoughts and actions. They found that during adolescence, the bigger hubs used for complex thought get consolidated and strengthened, a bit like how Heathrow or JFK have expanded over the years.
These are the nodes in the brain network.
The real prize for the team in Cambridge is to understand how mental illness develops. Some, like schizophrenia, where patients have hallucinations, emerge during late adolescence. The researchers have shown that the genes involved in rewiring the brain during the teenage years are also involved in many mental health disorders.
As we understand more about what puts people at risk for schizophrenia, that gives us an opportunity to try and identify individuals that are at risk of becoming schizophrenic in the foreseeable future over the next 2 or 3 years, and perhaps offering some treatment then that could be helpful in preventing the onset of clinical symptoms.
Alice has lived with a condition similar to schizophrenia ever since she was 18. She's a photographer and teaches art at university, but she still has occasional delusional episodes.
To describe it, it's like being awake while you're in a nightmare. I would ride a bus and it would seem as if everyone on the bus was talking directly to me and saying nasty things about me, and actually that was quite frightening to experience.
The research shows just how fragile the developing brain is, at its most vulnerable during the crucial teenage years. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
The new England football manager Sam Allardyce has described the job as the greatest challenge of his career. Speaking for the first time since being appointed, he said he wanted to create a feel-good factor in his squad, but he wouldn't be drawn on whether Wayne Rooney will continue as captain. Here's our sports editor, Dan Rowan.
You've not seen this one before, have you? You've not seen that one, have you?
Sadly for England fans, what they have seen before is plenty of managers come and go in recent years. The latest to try his hand, Sam Allardyce. The new man delighted to be here and confident he can succeed where so many others have failed.
To sit here is obviously a huge thrill for me. I think that I think I fit the chair. I hope I do. I think I've got the experience to pass on and not only challenge the England team but challenge myself, and I think I'm tough enough to take it. So bring it on, lads.
Allardyce made his name turning round the fortunes of Bolton Wanderers, getting the best out of players and narrowly missing out on the England job in 2006. He then managed Newcastle, Blackburn, West Ham and Sunderland, good at keeping teams up, but having never won anything, can he do so now with England?
Will it require some adjustment on your part?
When it comes to winning no trophies or winning no cups, well, unfortunately, me as an English manager never really got the chance to go right to the very top of the Premier League. You look at what I've achieved over the years, like I said, you save a club, you've not been relegated, you know. The big achievements, they're difficult to do.
Well, this is what he wanted. Sam Allardyce finally has the job that he's always coveted, but his task now is to revive England when they're at rock bottom and to confound those who say that this is sport's impossible job. Having been knocked out of the Euros by Minnows Iceland, breathing new life into England won't be easy, but one of those responsible for choosing Allardyce is convinced that Big Sam is the right man.
Sam's track record and all the clubs he's been at, I think it's difficult to argue that he hasn't made each one of those teams better. So we're very, very confident he'll come and do the same for England seniors.
Allardyce refused to say whether Wayne Rooney would continue as his country's captain. That's for the future. But with less than 6 weeks until an opening World Cup qualifier, the task of transforming England into a team the nation can be proud of begins here and now.
This is the good part of the job, you know.
Dan Rowan, BBC News.
England's cricketers have won their second test against Pakistan at Old Trafford by 330 runs. Pakistan set a mammoth 565 to win, were bowled out for 234 in their second innings with more than a day left in the match. It levels the 4-match series at 1-1. Back to the Olympics now, and there's less than a fortnight to go before the Games get underway in Rio. Team GB will be chasing a target of at least 48 medals. One of those British medal hopefuls is Dina Asher-Smith. She was a volunteer at the last Olympics in London, but is now the fastest British female sprinter ever. In the first of our series looking at the British ones to watch, our sports correspondent Natalie Perks has been to meet her.
If slow and steady wins the race, Dina Asher-Smith didn't get the memo.
She's looking up. It's a new British record for Dina Asher-Smith. She is very, very happy, and so she should be.
Not content with becoming the fastest British woman in history, she's just been crowned European champion and earlier this month won the national championships to cement her place in Team GB for her first Olympics. The 20-year-old's trademark beaming smile giving way to sheer relief.
After the British Championships, you tweeted, "I'm going to be an Olympian." Has that sunk in yet?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, it's been such a lifelong dream and something that I've kind of wanted for so long. I don't think it's going to sink in until probably I come home from Rio and I'm like, oh, I did that. I remember watching the 2004 Olympics. I remember watching Kelly Holmes going and doing what we thought wasn't possible, and then see the relay boys win Olympic gold as a sprinter as well. That was just absolutely amazing to watch. So I've always, from that moment, I decided I want to be an Olympian.
And you drew a picture for your mum, didn't you?
In primary school, we had to draw what we wanted to be, and I remember this was just after the Athens Olympics, so there was lots of Olympian pictures. But it was just like, I want to be an Olympian. It was me on the podium with that little headdress.
12 years later, she's studying history at university, but she's not exactly living a normal student life.
Most of the sacrifices come around my social life. My goals and aims, they're not really helped by going out, partying, staying up really, really late, eating bad food. That's just not how I'm going to get to where I want to be.
Most people at university your age would not be as focused as you are.
I mean, some people are lucky enough where things drop into their lap, but my mum was like, you can't take the chance and see if that is you. You might as well work hard and then make sure that it is.
As a kit carrier at London 2012, Dina had front row seats for Jessica Ennis-Hill's heptathlon gold. It helped fuel the fire of her Olympic ambition.
Just watching from the alcove just outside Lane 8, we were so close and we were just so happy. And being in the stadium when everybody is that happy and that proud of an individual athlete was absolutely incredible.
What's your realistic expectation of Rio? What do you hope to get out of Rio?
For me, focusing on running as fast as I can in the moment that counts is definitely what I'm going for. And whether that, I don't know how far that's going to get me. That might be, I don't know, might be a final place. It might be better than that. But as long as I've gone out there and genuinely done the best that I can, and fingers crossed, touch wood, run faster than I've ever run before, it will be good. Yeah.
Good luck to her. Dina Asher-Smith on her hopes for the Rio Olympics. Now, Newsnight is about to begin over on BBC Two in a few moments. Here's James O'Brien.
Tonight, is the coup against Corbyn running out of steam? Labour leadership challenger Owen Smith will be live in the studio to explain why he can still win. Join me now on BBC Two.
And that is all from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.